Hey, everybody. Good morning. It is Tracy Brown, and it's time for the Saturday morning Science of Mind and Spirit conversation. Are you ready? Okay, I'm ready, and I'm really excited about being here today. I'm really glad that Shay is here with us. And if you are watching live, please put your name, or your name will show up automatically, and put where you are watching from in the chat or in the comments section, and I will be happy to greet you. But guess what? We get to talk today about physical perfection. Now, we've been building up to this because we have been talking about how things happen, and we've been talking about causes and conditions last week. Like, what is going on um, in our bodies, in our minds, and in our experience, right? What's going on? And for the next 3 weeks, we are going to be paying attention to physical perfection. Now, even that title is a tiny bit misleading, just a tiny bit misleading, because it does make us think that it could make us think that we are talking about the perfect body, like physical body or form. And we will, in the course of these next two chapters, deal some with physical condition, dis-ease, but it's not just about that. And so I would invite you to keep in mind, as we focus on physical perfection for the next 3 weeks, that we are paying attention to the process and the principle, because it will apply whether we are talking about the human body, the physical body, the mental or emotional healing as well, even though we'll primarily focus on the physical body. Okay, so physical perfection, chapter 14. It begins on page 190 and goes through page 214. So I don't know if we can get through all the key points for 25 pages, because this is some really meaty content. But I'm going to do my best. And then over the next 2 weeks, other members of our team will go deeper with chapter 15. Altogether, Ernest Holmes spends about 75 pages on this topic. And while, yes, he somewhat repeats, these two chapters, these 75 pages, are rich. I mean, so rich with basic foundational information you need to have if you want to move into demonstrating these principles in your life. So, Tracy, stop talking about what's in it and dive into what is in it. Let's go. So on page 190, at the beginning of chapter 14, Ernest Holmes does what he always does at the beginning of each chapter. The summary of the subsections is right at the top of the page. And there are a lot of subsections, as you might imagine, since there are 25 pages in this chapter. But some of them that I know I'm going to highlight, what we understand about healing. We are allowed to choose. Man, or humanity, reenacts God or divinity. Only our own concepts limit us. Spiritual mind healing. Disease is impersonal. Disease is not always due to conscious thought. How to heal. Healing is clear thinking. No sensation in treatments. The medium of healing. Treating children, the power of the word, and seeing perfection. Any of those subtitles capture your attention, I absolutely encourage you to read the full chapter, page 190 to page 214, because there is no way I can go through all of it in the next 40-ish minutes, 40 to 45 minutes. Okay, you see me rolling up my sleeves? Woo, there's a lot here. Let's dive in. So, as usual with Ernest Holmes' chapters, he does an overview at the beginning. This one is kind of long, so I'm going to simply highlight. So, this subsection is titled What We Understand About Healing. First paragraph. There is no question that people throughout the ages have been healed through prayer and faith, that they have mentally contacted a healing law in this spiritual universe of law and order. How did they contact this law? All prayer is mental. Being a certain mental attitude, a certain way of thinking, a certain way of believing, an uplifting process, a belief in God. Some prayers fall short of this state, while others reach a state of spiritual awareness. We come to understand then that the answer to prayer is in the prayer when it is prayed. The belief of the one praying sets in motion the law of love, which is the fundamental law of the universe. So, those are the first two paragraphs. And then he goes on in this introduction to what we understand about healing to really make a link between belief, faith, prayer, and healing. One of the lines that I really love on page 191 is the spirit knows and the law obeys. And it's simply a reminder of what was covered both in the 4 introductory chapters, but then also in some of the earlier chapters about how the law works, what is spiritual law. Not like the commandments, but the law, the natural way that life expresses and expands itself. So this sentence is the reminder. The paragraph starts off with, man will deliver himself from sickness and trouble in exact proportion to the discovery of self and the true relationship to the whole. And then later in that paragraph, spirit knows, law obeys, and hidden away in the inner nature of humanity is the law for life. So that's just that reminder that we're not actually doing anything. Law is obeying our belief in our faith. Law is obeying what we truly believe and what we truly have faith in. At the very bottom of page 191, Ernest Holmes also reminds us, this whole first section is reminding us of basic principles of how the universe works that have already been covered. So at the very bottom of the page, Ernest Holmes writes, we realize that mental healing must also be spiritual healing, for the two cannot be divorced. We know a belief in duality, for example, a belief in the power of good and the power of evil, has helped to destroy humanity. And the understanding of unity alone is what heals. So Too much cannot be said against the belief that willpower is creative. The will is directive, but not creative. Repeating in middle of page 192. Too much cannot be said against the belief that willpower is creative. The will is directive, but not creative. So we do not heal ourselves and we do not move into the perfect expression of our physical experience simply by willpower. What's happening is when we truly believe that healing is possible, and we have faith in the ability of our body to heal, or the cells in our body to do what they know how to do in order to experience the best possible health, that we are being directive. And as we hold on to that and demand that it be delivered, we are directing, but we are not actually creating the healing or the perfection. That is happening because of spiritual law. That is happening because that is the way nature works to respond. And so that line in the middle of page 192, or this whole paragraph in the middle of page 192, is super, super, super important for us to remember. The will is directive, but not creative. Will is the conscious directive power of the intellect, and as such, has a very important place in the creative order. But in no case is it to be used as though will by itself can force things to happen. And any idea of using the will to influence other people is a mistake. So that foundation for us is being laid. And at the end of this section, Ernest Holmes writes, what we concentrate then is our attention. This is done through intention and the willingness to hold thoughts centered until the form appears. We concentrate our attention. We are not using willpower to make it happen. If we are using willpower, it's being used to focus us and concentrate our attention on the desired outcome, on the desired result. And the universe then is responding to that attention and that intention, and reconfiguring the universe, reconfiguring whatever needs to be reconfigured in order to deliver that outcome. I am pausing here because there is a part of me that wants to talk for the next 10 or 15 minutes about that, because it's so foundational. But we're in chapter 14. So I'm going to trust that you actually have been in some earlier conversations and that you have the foundation. And what I am doing is simply reminding you of that. So let's go to the next section, which is subtitled, We Are Allowed to Choose. And it begins at the bottom of page 195 in the textbook. In the chapter on physical perfection, we are allowed to choose. Humanity has the ability to choose what they will do with their lives and is unified with the law, which automatically produces this choice. So, again, quoting, there is a perfect concept of humanity held in the mind of the universe as an already accomplished fact, but each person is subject to the law of their own choice. So we are at choice We live in a universe, Ernest Holmes writes in the second paragraph on page 196. We live in a universe of love as well as a universe of law. One is the complement of the other. The universe of love pulsating with feeling, with emotion, and the universe of law, the executor of all feeling and all motion. One is the feeling, one executes based on that feeling. So, Ernest Holmes quote, in this lesson on healing, then, let us remember that in back of the person we see is the divine image. Repeating, in this lesson on healing, then, let us remember that in back of the person we see is the divine image. End quote. Now, this becomes super, super important because if we cannot see, recognize, connect to the divine perfection, then we will stay attached to whatever is broken, missing, not working, creating discord. So remembering that in back of the human, in back of the person, there is a divine truth. There is a divine source. There is a divine image or idea. Because what you are doing when you are moving toward physical perfection is you are simply creating the opportunity for the divine image to reveal itself, for the cells in the body to remember and reconfigure themselves in order to align with this divine image that Ernest Holmes is referring to. This is what's happening. And if we don't stay consciously aware of that, then we will be off track and we will be confused by the results that we experience, because the results will reflect where we are praying from what we are believing about the body and or perfection. So the next subsection is man reenacts God. And this is a pretty short section. And I'll just read his opening comments because it summarizes pretty well. Man is conscious mind or spirit. This stands for his objective faculty. The objective mind of man is his recognition of life in a conscious state. It is the only attribute of man that is volitional or self-choosing. Repeating. A human being is conscious mind or spirit. This stands for the objective faculty. The objective mind of mankind is the recognition of life in a conscious state. It is the only attribute of mankind that is volitional or self-choosing. So just a side note and a reminder that when Ernest Holmes is using the word man, it is a genderless or a gender neutral term. So it is not referring to a person whose gender is male. It is not referring to any specific gender. It is referring to humanity or the human experience. So man reenacts God. With that beginning, he summarizes this section with this. Healing then is accomplished by uncovering, neutralizing, and erasing false images of thought and letting the perfect idea reflect itself through subjective mind into the body. Repeating and listen for the pathway. Healing then is accomplished by uncovering, neutralizing, and erasing false images of thought. And then letting the perfect idea reflect itself through subjective mind into the body. When one realizes that everything is mind and that nothing moves but mind, and that the only instrument of mind is our thought, which is contemplation in some form or other, you will see that nothing can permanently heal unless it is accompanied by right thinking. Nothing can be permanently healed unless it is accompanied by right thinking. So I'm always very careful about using the phrase change your thinking, change your life, because it sounds like it's some magic. And we often forget to talk about everything that happens between the time you change your thinking to the time your life actually changes. Because in between there, right, our thinking drives our beliefs, right? Our thinking and our feeling, our mental and emotional states drive our beliefs drive our behavior becomes habitual, and then those habits actually generate a life that we experience. So I'm careful about saying change your thinking, change your life, as if it's a one-step process. But what Ernest Holmes does is remind us that, yes, it is our thoughts that are influencing the direction our life takes or the experience we have. And that as it applies to healing, we uncover, neutralize, and erase false images. And that is what lets the perfect idea reflect itself through subjective mind and then into our body. So I'm, really curious if you've had some experiences where you can connect these principles into the way that your own healing has shown up, or the way that you have experienced healing and movement from false thoughts and false beliefs into a healing that reflects wholeness or harmony internally with the body. Because if you have, then what's likely is that you have had some experience of recognizing when you were thinking about lack or limitation or pain or disease, and it expanded, like what you were focusing on expanded. And then you may also have some personal demonstrations of when you began to clean out those old assumptions, and when you began to erase those false beliefs and instead focused on my body knows exactly what to do, then you experienced a higher level or a higher level experience of health or wellness. I know so many people who simply, it doesn't have to be some major, quote unquote, what we in the human side think of as some major dis-ease or disability. or diagnosis. It could be that thought of, oh, yeah, every time the season changes, I catch a cold, right? It's not life-threatening. It's a little irritating, maybe a little inconvenient, but it's not debilitating. And so we don't realize how we accept that false belief, and the universe is simply saying, oh, okay, well, the season's changing, the weather's changing. It's time for Tracy to get a cold, or, some upper respiratory distress or something. And I just accept it as that's my normal. And I don't even think of it as wrong. And I'm not saying that there's never anything that happens that, you didn't plant the seed for. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, I think. Oh, maybe not. Oh, yeah, we'll get to it. But it is important for each one of us to take responsibility for paying attention to what thoughts am I programming myself to believe about my own physical perfection or my own health and wellness. And again, just planting the seed for you that our health and our wellness is physical, mental, and emotional. I don't want us to separate them completely, even though for this chapter and the next couple of chapters, Ernest Holmes does let us take a deep dive into what is happening with our physical body. So the next section is only our own concepts limit us, which is pretty much what I was just talking about, that if I have a concept that I get a cold 3 times a year, okay, that's my concept. That's not necessarily Spirit's idea of my body being healthy and whole. And so our own concepts and the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs we accept that come from the general culture also are having an impact. The next subsection is spiritual mind healing. Now, a couple of chapters ago, the whole chapter was on mental and spiritual treatment. Chapter 11 and chapter 12 was an entire chapter on the summary of the middle of the book and spiritual mind healing. And I love that even on the first page of chapter 12, Ernest Holmes writes, sickness is not a spiritual reality. It is an experience, and it is an effect, not a cause. The body, devoid of human mentality, could neither know nor experience sensation. It is entirely an effect. The body of a person is made from the same undifferentiated spiritual substance from which all creation is formed. Okay, so again, that first sentence, sickness is not a spiritual reality. It's an experience that we have. So now we're in chapter 14, where he's diving completely into the physical perfection of our body and how to get there and how to maintain. And it is that reflection that Shay reminds us of. Like, do I believe in the divine intelligence of my body temple and its ability to heal itself? Do I believe And as Wayne says, it's important for us to be good to ourselves. And being good to ourselves really does require us to understand, one, when our body is out of alignment with our best and clearest and perfect wholeness, and what are things we can do in order to realign? What are things we can do to realign? So in this chapter 14 on page 198, Ernest Holmes begins a kind of long subsection specifically on spiritual mind healing. But again, we just did a deep dive on spiritual mind healing in chapters 11 and 12. So he's basically pulling some highlights from those two chapters and putting them here so we don't have to go back to chapters 11 and 12 and look for the quotes. Here are a couple of highlights. One, never forget that conscious mind is the only actor in the universe and in humanity. That the unconscious or subjective mind is compelled by the reason of its nature to accept. In other words, your conscious mind and your conscious thoughts have the power to drive your subconscious. Side note, for most of us, most of the time, we forget this. And so our subconscious is running on default, or our subconscious is running on a story that we told it 10 years ago, or our subconscious is running based upon what I read in the news and all the articles I read. And so my subconscious or my subjective mind is always responding to what has been consciously programmed into it. Now, here's the good news. That means if I consciously program the belief that every cell in my body is healthy, consciously, and I program that and I program that and I program that through affirmations, through spiritual mind healing, through treatment, through prayer. I am consciously repeating that until it becomes my subconscious thought that even when I'm not thinking about it, I know it. Right. And so my body is responding from that place of the subconscious thought, of the conscious thought that has been embedded so fully and completely within me that I can't think of anything else. My subconscious really has no choice but to embody that conscious thought and belief. And it's funny, as I was saying that, I don't know, you may know this song as well. Every little cell in my body is healthy. Every little cell in my body is well. Every little cell in my body is healthy. Every little cell in my body is well. Right? And it's like singing that song all day. I remember when I first learned it, and I wasn't feeling any pain. I wasn't experiencing any disease or diagnosis, but it was really catchy, right? And it has a chorus and all of that. And I found myself just singing it over and over, or humming it, or singing it out loud in the car while I'm driving. And it's like, oh, 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 I'm programming my subconscious to know this, so that now what happens if I am, a couple of months ago, I came back from a trip and I was having some upper respiratory congestion and upper chest congestion. And I I didn't think about it. I just heard myself singing, every little cell in my body is healthy. Every little cell in my body is well. I'm so glad every little cell in my body is well. I'm like, oh, that's so deeply programmed now that subjective mind pulls it forward even when I forget to think about it. And that made me actually go, oh yeah, I need to be consciously claiming my wellness, not my illness, and transforming into the healthy being that I know I am. So Ernest Holmes in this section actually does a fabulous job of summarizing and repeating how we use spiritual mind treatment and spiritual mind healing to attain physical perfection. And then he moves on to remind us about a few things that are really important. Disease is impersonal. It's the next section, and it begins on the bottom of page 200. Quote, the word disease means lack of ease, dis-ease. Abnormal is the absence of a normal condition. From the standpoint of the mental practitioner, disease is an impersonal thing attempting to operate and personify itself into the mind of the one who has it. And of course, into the actual experience of the one who is suffering from it or who's experiencing it. But regardless of its particular source, disease is an experience operating through people which does not belong to them at all. Recognize that dis-ease is neither person, place, nor thing. There is no spiritual law to support it. It is discord fleeing before harmony. You must know that the power you are using is definite, scientific, dynamic, spiritual, absolute, complete, and it will work. Let no fear come into your thought. The first thing someone who practices science of mind does is to separate the belief from the believer. Separate the belief from the believer. Separate the belief from the believer. So the belief that I get a cold 3 times a year is not the truth of who I am. It's a belief I have, but it is not the truth of Tracy. So if I'm doing treatment around that, I am attaching and aligning myself with the truth of Tracy, which is that she is whole and perfect and complete, that every cell in her body knows that it is healthy. Every cell in her body cooperates with every other cell in order to reveal the wholeness that is already present and available. I'm aligning with that because the cold, the dis-ease, is not an actual entity. Now, for some people, that really freaks them out. It's like, how could it not be an entity? I'm experiencing it. I'm coughing. My nose is stuffed up. I have a running nose. Right? I'm sick. No, your body is reflecting some symptoms, but they are not who you are. They're just a temporary experience that you are going through, and you are going through it moving toward the reveal of your wholeness. That's what this entire chapter is about. What is physical perfection? How do we get back to it? The next section is so powerful. And I really would love to read all 4 paragraphs to you, but I'm not. I'm just going to tell you the key point. The title of this subsection is Disease is not always due to conscious thought. Why is this so important? Because there are too many people who think they have, well, no, let me not say it that way. There are too many people who have studied basic metaphysics or have read a little bit of science of mind, and they have attached themselves to the idea that thoughts are things and our thoughts create our experiences. Those are true statements. But our individual thoughts are combined with the thoughts of the collective, the thoughts of those who we are around, the cultural thoughts or race consciousness, human race consciousness. They're all having an impact on each and every one of us. So our responsibility is to claim and own what our conscious thoughts are so that we can influence the experience we have of our lives. But all of our conscious thoughts, a lot of things that happen to us are due to our subconscious thoughts, and some disease is from subconscious thought or collective thought. So Ernest Holmes does have a section here to remind us that disease is not always due to our conscious thought. So please, if you have ever asked someone, oh, I'm so sorry. I heard that you have been diagnosed with cancer. I'm so glad that it was caught early. But what's in your consciousness that would attract cancer? What are you thinking that is causing you to have Parkinson's? What is it that's in your consciousness that has created a loss of hearing? Stop it. Please, stop it. So Ernest Holmes reminds us that disease is not always due to conscious thought. While most disease must first have a subjective cause, this subjective cause, 9 times out of 10, is not conscious in the thought of the person who suffers from it, but is perhaps largely the result of certain combinations of thinking. So while it is true that disease has a prototype and subjective mind, it is also true that the individual who suffers from the disease frequently has never thought they were going to have that particular kind of trouble. I have met people who have had a very serious health diagnosis that scared them a lot. And as I worked with them, it became very clear that their experience was their health experience, which was looked at as a negative, was their pathway to something they had been praying for a long time. Sometimes I'm not going to get sidetracked, but literally, I can think of a number of people who had for a long time been saying they wanted to deepen their faith. They wanted to have a closer relationship with God, with Spirit, with the creator of all life. And as they went through the process of a diagnosis and then healing of a significant disease, their faith deepened. Now, I'm not saying there's a one-on-one correlation to that, but Ernest Holmes reminding us it's everybody doesn't have a disease because they have been thinking about that disease. And it could be a pathway to something better, something that they actually have wanted. So the other piece to remember is exactly what Wayne has put in the chat, that the illness is not in charge of you or me. It is an experience we are having. It's temporary. And if I know that about myself, I can remember that about you and avoid what Shay commented on. It's absolutely spiritual malpractice to tell people they caused their own illness. And so we're all working with that. So we are not close to the very end of this chapter. So I'm going to do a couple of highlights. And then next week, when I believe it's Dr. Robert, it's either Dr. Robert or Dr. Mark, one of them will come next week and pick up where I left off and then go into the first part of the next chapter. So on page 202, Ernest Holmes does a beautiful transition. Up until this point in the chapter, for 10 or 12 pages, he has been making sure we understand the definition of disease and how it occurs and what's happening when it shows up in our lives. But at this point on page 202, he begins to transition from defining disease to demonstrating physical perfection. And so we need that foundation of the first 10 or 12 pages to make sure that we're understanding what is happening when we are experiencing something that is less than our physical perfection. However, at this point, now we're ready to actually move into demonstrating physical perfection. And the sections are how to heal, healing is clear thinking, and no sensation in treatments, the medium of healing, treating children, the power of the word, and then seeing perfection. So in this how to heal, and healing is clear thinking, I'm going to set you up with that and invite you to hold on to it during the week and then come back next week for more. How to heal, page 202. In our work, in our spiritual work, we treat humanity not as a physical body, neither do we treat the disease as belonging to the person. The reason being that if we do that, we cannot subsequently free the person from the disease. We do not think of the disease as being connected with the person or as a part of that person. The practitioner seeks to realize the person as perfect, not needing to be healed of anything. So again, we're connecting to the truth that is in back of the physical experience. And so you recognize your own perfection or the perfection of someone that you are praying for. The work must not be thought of as hard. It's not difficult, right? When I am clear about the perfection, I remember the universe is doing the work, not me. So I don't have to effort. I can't beat up the disease and make it go away. I focus my intention and my attention on the perfection that is the wholeness of this person, or of myself if I'm applying this to myself. Ernest Holmes writes, when we know that there is but one mind, we shall realize that this work could not be difficult or laborious. Right? We're talking about an infinite intelligence and an omniscient power and presence that has created everything that is nature, that is natural. And all we know about is our own earth or universe. We don't even know about all the other galaxies or possible universes that there might be. So if there is a source of life that can do all of that and keep it all running at the same time, clearing my body of a cold can't be that hard. So this switch on page 202 to now let's get to work is very, very powerful. And Ernest Holmes reminds us that scientific mental healing is the result of clear thinking, logical reasoning, which presents themselves to consciousness and then is acted upon by mind. And I'm going to leave you today with this part of a treatment that Ernest Holmes writes here and also uses in Living the Science of Mind and a couple of other places. As you move toward physical perfection, this is what I am believing for you. I'm sorry, hold on just a minute. Let me scroll down. As you move toward physical perfection, this is what I know for you. God is all. There is but one power, one intelligence, and one consciousness in the universe, one presence. This one presence cannot change. There is nothing for it to change into but itself. It is changeless, and it is my life now. It is your life now. It is in me now. I claim that no form of race suggestion, no belief in limitation, no subjective idea of limitation, no thought of karma, fatalism, theology, or hell, no horoscope or any other false belief has power. Accept none of them. If you have ever believed in them, if you have ever believed that the stars govern you, or that your environment governs you, or that your opportunities govern you, recognize now this is just a hypnotic condition into which you have fallen, and then deny every one of those false conditions until there is no longer anything in you that believes in them. This is what I hope for you. This is what I pray for you. This is what I know is true about you, because it's true about me, and it is true about every person on the planet. So, move forward into this week. If this is a topic that interests you, find chapter 14 in the Science of Mind textbook and let it soak in. And please, there are 3 weeks where we're diving into this because it is so important. And I want to invite you to dive in with us by hanging tight and joining us every Saturday for the Saturday morning Science of Mind conversations right here on the New Thought Media Network at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. My name is Tracy Brown, and I will see you next time.